welcome to Victoria Rumble Room. And I'm Robin Adair, once again with my co-host John Juricic. And John, once again, the giant evil shadow of Donald Trump hangs over our federal election race as we rapidly move towards the conclusion on April 28th.
Extraordinary that the two leaders are announcing policy positions almost daily, and it is Trump and his havoc with trade war threats that is defining our election. This would be such a different race if he wasn't around, but of course it would be a different world, wouldn't it?
Better world, I think. Better world, yeah.
Donald is shaping the Liberals' message, and it's working. Mark Carney, from the beginning, has ridden into this election as the Trump slayer and protector of the Canadian economy. All of this with the understanding that Carney and Trump have already agreed to begin negotiations once this election is over. Carney's version of the art of the deal. And the public is buying it, Robin.
And all the polls, all the opinion surveys are clearly showing that now as we move into these critical last few days, as we move towards the election, John. Every poll, including this Nanos survey, Liberals 44.3%. That's 6% ahead of the Conservatives, who are at 38, NDP at 8. No chance for the NDP. This may be a very tough time for Jagmeet Singh. BQ, the Bloc Québécois, 5.2%. There is some talk they might not win a seat. Wouldn't that be something else? And of course, the Greens and the People's Party, forget it. They are out to lunch. And will Elizabeth May actually get reelected in North Saanich? Well, who knows? But I would like to say a few more things about these numbers, John, and it's about the way the votes are weighted. I just heard from contacts that I have in Southern Ontario. They tell me that the polls now in Southern Ontario specifically are showing the Liberals are gaining tremendous support. And those are very, very rich ridings. There's a lot of them, and those ridings depend on things like the automotive industry, the pharmaceutical industry. There's so much industry in Southern Ontario and in Ontario in general that it drives the country, but it really drives that province. And with these tariffs, it's going to decimate Ontario. So people there are saying, Mark Carney will stand up against Donald Trump. They might like Poilievre. They maybe couldn't stand Justin Trudeau, but they don't want to take a chance that there isn't a strong voice to stand up against the evil Donald. And I think they probably have a point.
So once again, it's quite possible this election is won or decided by the time it leaves Ontario. Simply startling that could be the case. However, the world has changed a lot in 3 months. Hey, I see political scientist Michael Prince, regular contributor to the Rumble Room, suggesting the federal Liberals could win 2 or 3 seats on the South Island. Oh my gosh! Mark Carney is certainly winning large support amongst older voters. And guess what? Huge support from women of all ages. Check out this ECOS poll that garnered and determined a summary from all eligible female voters. 57% support the Liberal Party. Oh my gosh. 28% support the Conservative Party. And of course, laggards, 8% NDP, 3% Green, and 3% Bloc Québécois.
So we watch this major election campaign on a regular basis, and it's just amazing how it's shaping up. And, we have maybe one more area, one more stage here where things could change or shift. That will be the debates. First of all, on Thursday, it'll be the French language debate. On Friday, it'll be the English debate. And could that change the whole discussion? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Hard to believe, but you never know. Mark Carney has the lead. He can be very impressive, but not so much perhaps in debates. And his unfamiliarity with French, he's not a very fluent French speaker, could hurt him in that debate. While Pierre Poilievre is very experienced in the public realm, speaks excellent French. But again, is it enough to actually change people's minds?
Well, I cannot wait However, what do our Rumble Room audience think? Hey, besides, and oh my gosh, do they comment in hundreds and hundreds of people on our Facebook site? Here's just some of the viewer mail. Some certainly prefer Mark Carney with his business and banking experience. And like I said before, sometimes these are hard to read. James writes, the banker before the wanker.
And, Pierre Poilievre also has his detractors, John. Eric writes, Pierre Poilievre's actions have raised significant concerns. His decision to support the anti-vaccination trucker convoy reflects troubling judgment.
Yeah, certainly troubling is correct. Carney and the Liberals also come in for plenty of criticism. On the Rumble Room, Tom writes, Trump didn't cause a decade of Canada's problems. The Liberal government did.
And Chris also takes a poke at Carney's track record, as he says Carney destroyed England's economy. And I hope that people make their decisions based on what is best for our economy and our society, and not necessarily what's best or worst for Donald Trump. Let's base it on what Canada needs first, and that should be first and foremost. So lots of issues still to be discussed and really need to be thought through as we move towards our vote.
And one of the most prominent that's been with us, and we have discussed it for years on the Rumble Room, and that is housing and affordable housing. Mark Carney is promising 500,000 prefab houses every year. Pierre Poilievre is promising no GST on new homes. So, who's offering the better deal? Let's get in some experts. Let's turn to the Victoria Residential Builders Association Executive Director and zoom in Casey Edge. Well, now joining us once again in the Victoria Rumble Room, regular guest of the show from the Victoria Residential Builders Association Executive Director Casey Edge. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here, as always.
Yeah, right smack in the middle of an election campaign. What better time to talk to you? This federal Liberal government, in the past, has not deemed itself entirely responsible for new home construction. Anyway,
Justin Trudeau, actually, he even said that. He said, I don't know what his issue is. This isn't a federal responsibility. That was, a year ago he said that?
And it's
anyway,
certainly
go ahead,
become a hot topic during this election campaign. So let's start with Mark Carney and the Liberals, promising to build 500,000 homes a year in Canada. Is this possible, Casey?
No. And he's talking about building 500,000 homes, prefab, modular, that kind of thing. He's going to spend billions of dollars of taxpayers' money for this Build Canada program, similar to the BC Builds program, I guess, in some ways. And those kinds of programs spend billions of taxpayers' money, and they don't make any real dent on the on housing supply. One of the reasons being that where are you going to put these 500,000 homes, even if you could build them? Municipalities don't want them. A lot of municipalities in the CRD, at the end of the day, a house doesn't mean anything unless it's got land to sit on. And so the federal government has zero authority with respect to telling municipalities what their official community plans are. So and zoning. So if North Saanich says we don't want your homes, Mark, then those homes don't go into North Saanich. That's just the way it works. And as Prime Minister, perhaps Mark Carney should understand that. And then there's the other issue of using taxpayers' dollars for prefabricated homes, which I understand his past company actually invested a lot of money into that business.
How convenient.
And using taxpayers' dollars to undermine the businesses of home builders and trades in our region. Why is the government involved in market issues that could be solved by rolling back some of the exorbitant fees, taxes, regulatory issues that have really choked the housing market. Instead, the government wants to get into building homes, which is not a viable option at all.
Well, what about the workforce? Just curiosity about that. I mean, 500,000 homes. The builders that are building now sometimes are having trouble finding skilled labor to build with. I mean, where are the people going to come from? I mean, are prefab homes that much easier to build that you don't need people that have any skills to build them?
Well, you have to ramp that up. That's a whole set of other problems. If the government again would get out of the way of the industry, here's an example. We've always said that university students should be able to take an elective in a trade. Sure, take your normal degree, but there are electives offered. Why can't those thousands and thousands of university students take an elective in framing or carpentry and have good paying summer jobs, and then the option of a career in the housing industry when they get out of university? So what's holding that up? Well, the government doesn't recognize it. The post-secondary institutions operate in silos. We have solutions to those problems that the government will not implement.
Okay, well, we don't want to just rain on Mark Carney. Oh, well, we'll rain on Mark Carney, but we don't want to just rain on him. Let's talk about Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, who also came up with a plan, and it sounds a little reminiscent of what the BC plan has been doing. They're talking about new homes at a 15% rate every year and compounded 15%, and they're talking about no GST for homes under $1.3 million. So what's wrong with that idea?
Well, actually, Pierre Poilievre rolled out that no GST on homes under 1.3 million. He was the first to do it. Then Carney came out with his, during the Liberal leadership, with his no GST only for first-time home buyers under $1 million. So the way this is framed is, with Pierre Poilievre, he's saying all home buyers would not pay the GST on homes under 1.3 million. Carney's couching it into, well, just first-time home buyers. And how many first-time home buyers actually buy new homes? So at the end of the day, everything that gets rolled out, it seems, by Carney has this, the plausibility is just not there. And I think it's important that we have, as an association, we have always advocated indexing the GST new home rebate to inflation, which was promised in 1990 when the GST was introduced. It was never done by the Liberal government. And when Trudeau says, it's not a federal responsibility, it is a federal responsibility to index the GST new home rebate to inflation, because that rebate is no longer relevant in our because it caps out at 450. So it's no longer relevant in our region. So the other thing that we've suggested is that municipalities that don't want to come to the table with respect to housing should, their infrastructure grants should be cut back, because they don't have the new housing to justify those infrastructure grants. Communities like Langford, where all the new housing is going, yes, provide them with the grants. So there ought to be a penalty for municipalities. And that's something we advocated actually quite a few years ago, and Pierre Poilievre has actually adopted. So start to penalize the municipalities in terms of their infrastructure grants, which is a grant from the federal government to municipalities. But there you have to be fairly selective in terms of what the federal government can do with respect to housing. And this nonsense of building 500,000 homes a year and just dropping them into the municipality shows a complete misunderstanding of how the government works in our country.
Okay,
so you're saying Poilievre's plan is plausible. You think Poilievre's plan can work?
Absolutely. Well, we've advocated this for some time. As a matter of fact, I have to give him some kudos, because his housing policy people contacted me and said, look, we don't build homes, we don't sell homes. We need to find out from the industry how it works. And so, yes, he's adopted some of those ideas, because he bothered to pick up a phone and say, you're experts in the housing industry. How does this all work? What would work? I haven't heard anything from the Liberals. I haven't heard anything from Carney. So if somebody went into your business and said, we're going to tell you how to fix your business, and never asked you how to fix it or solutions or understood your business, you just show them the door.
All right, I'm going to build upon this sort of a component of the stuff you've said. We got it. These folks want to build prefabricated homes. They want to spend billions of dollars doing that. And quite obviously, where do you put them? Got it. So for our audience, which of the two party leaders that are going to, either one of them be prime minister, are dealing with the land use piece of this equation, which at this point is like, okay, I went to Costco on the weekend. I could barely move. Clearly, we need another large commercial Costco somewhere in Lower Vancouver Island. There's no place to put it. Same thing with homes. Where do you put them? Which of the two party leaders has been the best in messaging around land use?
Okay, so at the end of the day, the federal government needs to work with the province to deal with municipalities, because the municipalities are the children of the province. That's just the way it works. And so the province has to come to the table and start doing some responsible regional planning. So we need responsible regional planning so now you've got Victoria and Saanich talking about amalgamation. This is what has to happen if you want to plan for housing, transportation, infrastructure in our region. That is a provincial responsibility. The province has skirted around those issues, and in fact, rather than deal with those issues, EB created BC Builds. What they keep doing is actually coming up with government solutions that actually refuse to deal with the real issue, which is 13 official community plans in a region of 400,000 people where there's no responsible regional planning, and it's based on a longstanding policy of municipal self-determination. That irresponsible governance policy was supported by the NDP, the SoCreds, and the Liberals.
So the question I have then is, the BC program has been underway for a while under Minister Callon, and BC Builds, we've heard threatening noises towards municipalities of, you've got to get cracking and build more of these buildings. And we saw them, of course, shut down the Airbnbs to a lot of fanfare. So has some of this worked? I mean, you're obviously sounding very condemning of the way things are being operated with the municipalities in the province, but have some of the things that the NDP and this current provincial government done actually been effective in helping to solve the housing shortage?
No. And the reason is because they created loopholes big enough to drive a truck through. So as an example, they expanded development cost charges and amenity contributions. So you can now charge builders for your new police stations, your fire stations, and then they created site standards which were not mandatory. So what happened is municipalities changed their sites or implemented site standards that made building impractical or too unaffordable.
All right, I'm going to stay on land use because this is a big barrier in my mind. And actually, in my opinion, Pierre Poilievre is the only one of the two leaders that has alluded to this and understood this fact, at least publicly, and talked about federal buildings, for example, being repurposed on federal land, or residential being repurposed on federal land, or military land. Or to the uninformed voter, we seem to have a lot of land.
This is Pierre Poilievre now who's suggesting we do that.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
So in terms of what do you think of that? I mean, to some, okay, you're providing extraordinarily expert opinion, and I'm so glad that these parties are referencing you for help.
One of them is.
Oh, geez, one of them
is, yeah.
The conservatives. Okay, but generally to the uninformed, it feels like there's a lot of land. You know, there's a lot of land to build on. What do you say to those folks?
There is. So you got 15,000 square foot lot in Saanich. BC Assessment Authority says that property is worth $1.2 million. The house is worth $100,000 because it was built in 1940, and the property is worth the whatever million. So at the end of the day, yes, you could subdivide that property into 2 or 3 homes or create a small, multifamily or whatever it is. And so that can be done. But at the end of the day, the municipalities are so capable and experienced at throwing up fees, taxes, and obstructions that it's very difficult to do. And again, it comes back to the province. You have to understand governance in order to understand the housing issue. And governance is that the province has the ability to address these issues. Keep in mind, with respect to market housing, government controls zoning, they control permits, they control fees. The government controls everything that a builder does with respect to building a new home. And so they have the ability to fix it. They don't have to build 500,000 new homes a year. They just have to fix the problems that they have created with respect to those issues. Building regs, zoning, taxes and fees, and the permit process and how long it takes. But rather than do that, they trot out these Band-Aids that are just a Band-Aid on a Band-Aid.
We're going to have more to say coming up at the end of the week. At the end of the week on the debates and maybe our final predictions on what we think is going to happen in this election campaign. But so much is going on. We keep talking about how it changes every day. Suddenly we hear, no, we're going to back off on these tariffs on the car industry. That's a new thing. And there's concerns still weighing over the pharmaceutical industry and what happens there and what's going on with China. So many things could happen in a week's time. It's pretty hard to predict even day to day. And I also wanted to just comment on something totally separate from the election. We've been talking so much about it, and the fact that it's Easter. And Easter, it's a big holiday. It means a lot to some people for a variety of reasons. And it's interesting if you see it practiced in other countries, they have various ways of celebrating it. For example, here's some video from Spain. These are traditional Spanish ways of celebrating the Easter holiday, and they parade through the streets. And it's beautiful. It's very medieval, but it's quite beautiful to see. And then you think, well, how are Canadians honoring Easter? How is it going? Well, I think there are a lot of people that hold Easter very near and dear. There'll be a lot of people going to churches and celebrating the Easter festivities. But how is it on, the House of Commons? How is it up there in Ottawa in terms of celebrating a holiday? Well, let's take a look at this. Well, there's the cross from Easter with a Palestinian arraignment as the pro-Palestinian protesters march on the Parliament buildings again. And I know it's free speech, but imagine if this was a major Muslim holiday and a bunch of Christians decided to march around screaming and protesting in the middle of, say, Ramadan or one of the other major holidays on the calendar for the Muslim faith. There would be, well, dare I say it, hell to pay. So, I wish everyone a happy Easter. I wish peace on earth, certainly peace in the Middle East, and I wish the cooler heads could prevail. And on that happy note, John, time for us to wrap up the show and talk about how people can tune into the Rumble Room.
Robin, that was a wonderful summary. The free speech equation, the variables in Canada, has been skewered for some time. It's not making any sense, and it needs to start making sense. Thank you for bringing that up. And if all of you want to comment on our shows, there are many ways in which you can do that. Obviously on Facebook, you're already doing it. On Twitter, as well as on YouTube, where we have all of our videos hosted. And on top of that, we have an audio version of our vodcast, and we are on Instagram, and we are on TikTok. And so, as we head into maybe one of the more, as they always say, one of the more important elections in our lifetime, I truly believe this one is. So listen to as much information as you can, listen to the Rumble Room, and listen to us, because I will forever remain the Croatian sensation, Johnny Juricic.
And Johnny will be galvanized at this debate, the English debate. Sadly, I don't speak enough French to understand the other, but we'll get the coverage on that. We'll have some analysis on that, and we will certainly encourage everyone to get out and vote on this very important election issue. The salvation of the country, what Canada is as a nation, and where we go from here. These are the important things to keep in mind. And the other thing to keep in mind is that we should all rumble on.